I'm Tom Howard, other half of Miller Howard Workshop. I'm talking today just from our self-build startups perspective about how to find a plot. And so there's various current ways you can do it. You can buy a plot on Rightmove or Plot Finder or something like that. So you can get one with permission or without permission. And I'm sure lots of people have had a good look on there. I had a quick look this morning, stuck in Stroud of a 3-mile radius, and this is what popped up. And they're about £500,000, and there were very few. There's typically very little out there for sale. There was a bit more than I had expected. Often you go on there and there's nothing at all. There was a little bit this morning. But that is one option. Then you can do replacement dwellings, so a little bit like what Thomas and Anna were just talking about. You can buy, a bungalow or something to knock down and build another house, and that falls quite neatly within the existing planning system. But it's pretty expensive, and Thomas and Anna were talking about the carbon cost of that as well. You're knocking down what's often quite a reasonable building to start again. And then you can do conversions. So I'm sure everyone's seen lots of barn conversions. Again, that typically falls quite neatly within existing planning law. And there are fairly recent planning laws where you can get permitted development rights to convert offices and that sort of thing. A lot of those sorts of buildings aren't great for an individual self-builder. They're too big, they create slightly odd spaces, that sort of thing. That's a sort of typical thing that's on the market. And then within current planning legislation, there's this funny clause called paragraph 80, which allows you to build a new house in open countryside, but it's restricted to people who are farmers, building their agricultural dwelling, or forestry workers, building their own dwelling, doing that, and you can't really game that. Or you go in and do a new country house, what's called sort of something of outstanding and innovative architectural quality, which are, these sorts of things. So we're talking kind of mega grand designs. I mean, as a rule of thumb, you're looking at spending £100,000 just on the planning without the plot and without the building. So it's not really achievable for the mainstream market. And that's sort of what our existing planning system has been dishing up for quite a long time, which seems like a real shame. But I think that we think there is some considerable cause for optimism. 7 or 8 years ago, the government strategy shifted towards diversifying the housing market. Now, this is going to be really small, this graph, but I think it's quite interesting. 1996 through to 2017, with the financial crash here, this is the total number of houses built in each year. So 150,000, 200 and something thousand, big crash, and then slowly building again. But the red is the proportion of houses built on really big sites, so 500 house plus sites, and the blue is the smaller sites. And if you can see this, there's a lot less blue over here. So since the financial crash, the smaller sites dropped out of the markets. This line here is the total number of builders in the business. If you look at that, it's diminished really badly. So this is why the government was looking to diversify the housing market. And this graph, I think, is also really interesting. This is the proportion of housing that is self-built per country. There's Austria, 80%, Belgium, Italy, Sweden, about 70%, UK, 6%. We're miles behind the rest of Europe and most of the rest of the world. I mean, there's lots of reasons for that, but that's what our planning system has delivered for 4 or 5 decades. So, in 2015 and 2016, there was an Act of Parliament called the Build and Custom House Building Act, which required councils to keep a register of anyone who wanted to build their own house and then deliver enough plots to meet the demand on that register. And that, in the last month, has been updated with the levelling, it's not very catchy, LURA, Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, which has just tightened up a bunch of the loopholes in that original legislation. I don't know, how many, show of hands, how many people have ever heard of the self-build registers? 15, 20%? Okay, I think that's interesting in and of itself, and you're here because you're interested in self-build. So this is not a piece of legislation that very many people know about, but it has the potential to make a really big difference, and it's starting to. So what does this mean, and what are the opportunities? This legislation should mean that it should be easier for self-build schemes to get planning, and the planning appeals landscape. I don't know if you know about planning appeals. If you can't get permission, you can appeal the decision. The planning appeals sort of landscape of that is showing that self-build is starting to tip decisions from being a refusal to an approval because of this legislation. It's not perfect though, this isn't a silver bullet, and it's not really working very well at the moment. Most councils are trying to ignore the legislation. They're hiding their registers. They're clearly not publicising them very well because no one yet knows about it. And then they're suppressing demand artificially by fudging the supply numbers. So they're saying we've actually delivered loads of self-build when they haven't. They're just sort of counting anything they think they can. And a lot of applications are getting refused and having to go to appeal, which is really costly, time-consuming, and it puts in big barriers for most people who want to just do a single self-built plot. It still feels very difficult. And single plot sites do still remain harder to get than if you do a multiple plot site. So LIVEDIN, we're a sister company from Miller Howard Workshop, and this is what we're really focusing on doing. What we're trying to do is make self-build mainstream and affordable. This is one of the sites. This was a photograph of a 12-plot site we've been doing in Norfolk, nearly finished. What we're doing is working with landowners, so anyone who's got an acre, 2 acres, 3 acres, whatever it is, we're working with them to get the planning, put in infrastructure, so put in driveways, pipes, wires, sewers, that kind of thing, so that we can then sell individual plots to self-builders. So you can buy a plot of, I don't know, 1/4 of an acre or something like that with the electricity, the sewer, the internet, and everything onto it, and then you can get on and build your own house. And so we work with the landowners to sell the land directly to self-builders, so you cut out the sort of developer piece in the middle, which just makes it a bit more cost effective. And we're doing this on lots of sites, fairly small sites, so generally up to 10 houses. But because we're doing lots of them, we're gathering a lot of data, a lot of expertise, and we have greater lobbying power and that kind of thing to councils, to planners, to government. And we're only doing self-build, so we're very, very focused on this. And Thomas, who's very technical, is helping to build plenty of software to help game the planning system to do it as well. So this is an example. What we've done is turn the words of the legislation, the Self-Build Act, into a calculation, and then put all the national data through that calculation, created a map which shows red councils are councils who aren't delivering enough plots. Green councils perhaps are, most of them probably aren't, but at least at face value they perhaps are. And then, so here, this shows that there's been 86,000 people have signed up onto registers and 50,000 plots have been delivered. So there's a shortfall of 35,000 plots, which creates a planning opportunity. You can then go in and look at each individual council. So this is freely available on our website, all this data. Our website's livedin.co.uk. So here's an example of Cotswold District Council. Blue line is people who've signed up. Red line is how much the council have supplied, and then the yellow line is therefore the unmet demand. And you can see this, you can look up any council in the country and you can see that. This is now accepted as a kind of national standard. There's nothing else out there that's been done. So our kind of presentation of the data is considered to be pretty much a national standard. So we're starting to use this for planning applications. I'm just going to briefly touch on this, but I think it's potentially a really interesting opportunity. In planning, I don't know if you're aware, but you have market housing and you have affordable housing. And affordable housing, you typically a scheme will have a mixture of market and affordable housing. And for self-build, what we think this means, and we've done quite a lot of research into this, is an affordable plot or a discounted plot. So instead of the plot costing maybe £200,000, it's sold as £30,000. And then the end value of the house that you build gets capped at 70% of market value or something like that. And we think this is a fantastic opportunity in the wider self-build market to have a real mix of market self-build and affordable self-build. So giving people an opportunity to get onto the housing ladder much more cheaply and get building, rather like Thomas and Anna have done, or George and Phil, or lots of other people have done. And it's surprising how many people are probably eligible for this. I think most people think, no, we won't fall into that bracket. I just did a very quick Google search today, and this spat out, and it said, if your total gross household income is less than £80,000, you might qualify. I mean, it's area specific. I suspect that's probably a suburb of London or something like that. But even around here, it's probably a total household income of something like £65,000, £70,000. And a surprising number of people would be eligible to meet that criteria. So this is something we're working on, and we want to start delivering plenty of affordable plots onto the market. I'm going to miss that slide. I suppose, probably sitting there thinking, what does this mean for me? What could I do? Registering with your local council, putting your name on that list is really helpful because it means that they have to meet that demand and encourage other people to do so. The more demand on those registers, the more self-build plots and the more self-build sites will have to come through and onto the market. And this is the first time I've ever asked this question, but I think there's an opportunity as well to do with site finding. At the moment, with LIVEDIN, we get our sites through all sorts of different ways. We write to people. The people that we know or connected to already. We are introduced through consultants. Some people find us and just get in touch. We put an article in Farmers Weekly last week, and we've had loads of phone calls about that. But I also just wonder whether people who are really interested in self-building would also be motivated if they know of a site, they know someone who owns a piece of land that might be suitable, to introduce it to us, and then if it's successful, to get some kind of share of some value created in that. And I have no idea whether that's of any interest to anyone, or whether that sounds like a dirty thing to do or whatever. But I just thought, actually, if there's lots of people who want to self-build, getting a name on a register and looking for sites, we're very happy to look at any land. We can quickly check out whether we think they've got any planning potential on our software. And whether that's something that might be interesting. And if it is, I'll be really happy to talk to anyone afterwards, because I don't know. And so, yeah, I suppose For one of those current options, conversions, replacement dwellings, buying a plot and building a house, Miller Howe Workshop are really well set to deal with any of those sorts of inquiries. But as LIVEDIN, I'd be really interested to talk to anyone who's interested in trying to be part of bringing more sites forwards. And that's it. Thank you. Yes, I don't know if anyone's got any questions or would prefer just to have a chat kind of afterwards.
What's the definition of self-built?
So in planning terms, the occupant has to have primary input into the design and layout. Exactly what that means is probably not particularly well tested in case law. But self-finished flats have been considered to be okay for that. So someone buying a shell of something and then figuring out some of the internal layouts and finishes and that sort of thing themselves is considered okay.
Right. So
Yeah.
if you project managed a main contractor even who has
it doesn't mean you have to pick up the tools and build it yourself.
No, but
So you could. It's more about having some design agency
right.
rather than actually building, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's the smallest size you mentioned for the LIVEDIN? You mentioned 1 acre going up.
Well, we're probably looking at probably three plots, maybe 2, but generally it's 3 plus. If it's a single plot, it doesn't work for us so well. And the planning, I don't know how much you know about planning. Some people really know lots. But if you're doing a 5-plot scheme, that has 5 times as much benefit as 1 from a planning perspective, because they're trying to tick houses off the register. See what I mean? So it's typically easier for that reason to get slightly bigger schemes through. But in terms of acreage, half an acre, that sort of thing. Yeah, so half an acre up to, I don't know, 2, 3, 4. We have looked at, and we've got a couple of much bigger sites kind of on our books, but we'll probably do them a little bit at a time over phases.